Hey folks, Colin here for Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you how to master your next song in just 4 steps. Okay, so for me, my mastering process can be broken down into about 4 steps. Now, the order can be a little bit flexible, that can change each time, but the steps remain the same, okay? So we're going to have gain, limiting, compression, and that can either be a regular compressor or a multi-band compressor, and then usually some kind of EQ as well, okay? So let's get started. Okay, so here I have a finished mix. This is just the stereo file, the finished stereo mix, and this is what we're going to start mastering today, okay? So I have a little loop here that we are going to work with, okay? So let me play you what the finished mix here sounds like, okay? So here is the finished stereo mix. Okay, so it's just a cover of How Long Will I Love You. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to put our limiter in place, okay? Before we push any more gain on this track, we're going to get a limiter in place and set our ceiling so we don't clip, okay? That's the thing we don't want to happen. We don't want to clip on our master, okay? So here is the stock limiter inside of Studio One, and we're going to set our ceiling at -1, okay? That's going to make sure we have enough headroom, whereas if this file gets compressed anymore by streaming services, iTunes, Spotify, it won't clip even if they push it a little louder, okay? All right, now the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put a gain tool on here. Now in Studio One, the gain tool is the mix tool here, okay? So we're gonna open up the mix tool, and I usually start with 6 dB of gain, okay? So I mix usually -5 and -6 dB below 0. So when I master, I usually have to add 6 dB of gain to get my mix up to a good, healthy master level, okay? So now that we've added 6 dB of gain, let's take a listen and let's look at the meters here, okay? Okay, now something to pay attention to when you're bringing up your gain to get it to a good commercial level is the LUFS number, okay? That's going to determine how your song sounds on streaming, okay? And usually you want to shoot for somewhere between -14 and -13. I like to usually shoot for -13, okay? So mastering in its most basic form is simply getting your mix up to a commercial volume, okay? And sometimes you have to deal with the artifacts that are produced by pushing more gain on your track, okay? So if you make your track a little louder, sometimes the frequency balance can change a little bit, so sometimes mastering can be dealing with those frequency imbalances, okay? So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna EQ this track, okay, to make sure it sounds good at this louder volume, okay? So here is our stock EQ inside of Studio One, and let's take a listen to this passage one more time, okay? So the first thing I'm noticing is maybe I want to push a little bit more of the high mids, okay? So let's take a listen to that. Okay, so that brings our vocal out front a little bit more, and we want to do that. We want to make sure she's the star. We want to make sure when you listen to this track, you feel like she's in front of the band, she's the star. So that's nice, okay? Let's take a listen one more time, see if there's anything else. So it feels like it's lacking just a little bit, just a touch here in the mid-range. So let's see if we can find that. that balanced out our vocal a little bit more, okay? So I want you to take a listen to these two moves. It's pretty subtle. Mastering EQ is usually very subtle, okay? You see, I'm not even doing dB moves here. We've got 0.9 and 0.48, okay? So I'm going to toggle this EQ on and off and take a listen to those two moves there, okay? So here's without, and then I'll put them back on. So you notice it pushes that vocal out front a little bit more. That's what we wanted to do. We want to make sure the vocal is the focus here. All right, so the next thing we can do is we can put a little bit of compression on this, okay? And we can try one of two things. We can either use a standard compressor. Sometimes I like to shoot for an SSL on the fat channel, or we can do some multiband compression. Now when I mix, I usually have an SSL style compressor on my mix bus. So for here, we're gonna shoot for a multiband style compressor, okay? And this is gonna balance out 3 frequency ranges, okay? I focus on 0 to 160, 160 to 2.5, and then 2.5 and up, okay? So that's our low end, our mid range, and our high end. Now I like to balance out those 3 ranges with this compressor, okay? And they are all linked together, so we're editing them all together. So let's take a listen here, and then we'll pull this down. So something we're going to do here is I'm going to put the multiband and the EQ before the gain, okay? So that way, any kind of compression I can do, I can adjust the gain afterwards instead of having the gain set beforehand, okay? So let's try this one more time. Okay, so before we go any further, let me talk about the settings on this multiband, okay? So all 3 bands have these same settings here. They are all linked. So we're doing 100 millisecond attack and 100 millisecond release. So we're doing a very slow attack here. We don't want to hit this too hard because it's an entire track. Bear that in mind. You're compressing the whole track. So if you hit it too hard, it can very quickly get very squash sounding, okay? So a slow attack and a medium slow release here, okay? We want to be very gentle with this track. And then again, because we're going to be gentle, we're doing a lower ratio, 2 to 1. We don't want to go crazy here. We're just doing a little bit of compression here, and it looks like we're just hitting the low end and the mid-range here. So technically, we're getting a little bit more high end out of this compressor. Take a listen and take a look here. You can see the overall compression here, and then the compression for each band here. Okay, so here is the mid band. So you see we're hitting her vocal with the mid band, and then take a listen to the low band. So you can see we're hitting that kick drum with the low band. So we're tucking those 2 things into the mix more into the song. And if you notice on the high band, we're not really doing much. So we're getting a little bit more shine out of this multiband because we're compressing those 2 lower bands. And it's kind of nice, okay? So the last thing we're going to do here, we've got our EQ good, we've got our multiband good. We're going to take one more look at the gain here and make sure the track is at a good, healthy level, okay? So we gained a little bit here. Now we're sitting around -12 instead of -14. That's kind of where I want to be. I want to be around that -13 level. That is a good LUFS number for streaming. That'll make sure your song sounds good on all streaming platforms, okay? I did notice, since we are compressing those two lower bands on the multiband, the high end is a little bit much, so maybe I'm going to pull that back a little bit, okay? So let's take a listen. How will I get So sometimes like this, where you're not sure if something is too much, it's easier to take it away and then add it back than it is to just start by taking it away and decide when it's enough, okay? So I started way down here because that's very clearly way too much taken out. And then I'm adding high end in as opposed to taking it away.
How long will I give to you? As long as I live through you. However long you stay.
So again, these are very subtle moves here. Not even a half a dB here, 0.48. That's very subtle. So let me click this EQ on and off, and you can hear those 3 moves, okay? So here's without, and then I'll click it back on.
How long will I give to you? As long as I live through you. However long you stay.
So you can hear those 2 moves in the mid-range there, and the high mids, they push that vocal out front a little bit more. But we're making sure we're not getting too much high end, too much of those S's, too much shine on the track, okay? Because those strings can be pretty bright. Now let me A/B the multiband and the EQ for you, okay? So this is the track with just the gain on it.
How long will I give to you? As long as I live through you. However long you stay. How long will I give to you? As long as I live through you.
So if you notice, without the multiband and without the EQ, the track is a little more flat, okay? And then when we click the multiband and the EQ in, you can hear a little bit of a trough in the track that the vocal sits in. You get a little bit more of a focal point for the vocal to sit in. All right, take a listen one more time, okay? I'll start without, and then I'll put them in, and listen to how the vocal changes in the track.
How long will I give to you? As long as I live through you. However long you stay.
Okay, and that's it. That's 4 simple steps you can take on your next track to make sure you have a good, healthy master, okay? Start with your limiter, get your limiter in place and set your ceiling. Add some gain, get it up to a good commercial level. Then mess with your EQ a little bit if you have any changes you need to make. If you need to push the mid-range up, pull a little bit of the low end out. Then reach for some compression if need be. If you want to use a single band compressor, an SSL style compressor, or if you want to use a multi-band like this to balance out those frequency ranges. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful for you. Leave a comment down below. Let me know how this works on your next master, and I will see you guys in the next video.